I've done is I've brought about 40 monumental effigies together in one slideshow and simply arranged them chronologically. So we start with this as the earliest one in the slideshow. It is 1240. It's the long speed effigy. And what you can see is a guy head to toe in mail. The only suggestion in this particular effigy of anything rigid is his head defense. Some sort of a skull cap under his mail.
Or maybe padding.
Maybe just padding, right. But there's certainly, he's not covered in plate. Yeah.
Isn't he wearing some kind of harness though?
There's none of this effigy. You can see the little bands there.
Yeah.
But these are essentially garters.
Oh, okay.
There's not yet any evidence of anything knees on this effigy. Another picture of the same effigy, just a different drawings. At this point, 1250. Once again, you see the same thing: head to toe male, shape of head.
It's okay, guys. It's okay.
Again, 1260, but you see something. Look at his knee. He's got a little tiny disc applied to his knee, and this is actually damaged. It's not. It doesn't have anything there. But he's got a little tiny plate attached to his knee. First effigy that I found that has plate on it. I'm sure there are more, and this is a project that's in its works. Going on, 1277, the John Algernon, the elder, the earlier one, has pretty fully developed knee armor. Maybe brass, Latin, could be leather, could be steel, could be applique stuff, could be paint. But he definitely has fully developed knee protection and a really bulbous head. Then we look at the Robert Duke of Normandy, 1280, he's back to full mail. So just because somebody came up with it, at least the artist at this point didn't feel he needed to carve it. Although there's a possibility of a retro look since Robert Duke of Normandy is dead for 300 years at the point his effigy was carved. Then we get to the Roger Trumpington effigy at 1289. He's got nicely developed knees, and he's got a great helm, sugarloaf helm, attached with a guard chain, which you can see. And if a person has a guard chain, it'll either be attached to the belt or oftentimes to a solid cuirass. And oftentimes when you see guard chains on effigies in art, authors argue that that is evidence for a solid person. Whether or not that's accurate is certainly one of the typical arguments.
Or
Or like something rigid, though, not mail. 1290, we're back to mail from head to toe, but he's got a really weird-looking lower lip. Possibly some sort of protection under his mail. We're seeing that come through. It's also possible the artist who drew this rendition didn't know what he was doing. This is a Hewitt drawing. This drawing is pretty accurate. Right. 1300, we've got a visible helmet, but nothing else. It's back to mail. 1300, knees and a full-length arm surcoat, so you can't tell if he's got anything in his arms.
those like straps on his elbows?
On his wrists.
On his wrist?
Tighten that nail down. Or secure a mitten. He's wearing these mitten mufflers. This guy's one of my favorites. 1300 in Ash Church, we don't know what it is. But nice knees. But look at the crease that runs down his leg. There's clearly something under there. And that's, although this is another Hewitt drawing, that's the way this one looks. Very definitely a crease. So there's grooves in there. And that's pretty good information. Still's got that big velvet too.
Which is so bizarre. Under the mail.
It does make a lot of sense.
It's weird when they do it in USA.
And anybody who's ever bought a mail under, a mail over plate armor of any form finds the mail gets smashed. Ripped and more.
It's going down the shoulder.
Oh yes.
Huh?
Little heraldic things to display his arms probably don't have an armor function. Though,
Other than,
around the turn of the century,
I'm me, don't hit me.
Yeah, I'm a good guy. See? You can see these are a lot of illustrated. They could be made of parchment. For a long time, people thought they were like an early form of the
Unit
Korean guard.
insignia.
But it doesn't seem to be any evidence.
What's around his head? Is that a traveling pillow for the flight to the Holy Land? Or?
Exactly. Yeah. Want to make sure he's comfortable. That's a pillow. That's exactly what it is. His head's resting on a pillow. And you see that on a few of the others. See, this guy's resting on his helmet. All right, 1325. Unfortunately, I have a little gap here of 25 years, and I really want to fill this in because we make a huge gap from the beginning of the 15th century to here. But here we go. Look at this guy. He's got a bassinet type thing. He's got arms with lovely lion's face spalders, lion's face rondelles on the elbow. He has a vambrace with inset hinges. So it's nicely cased. Legs, he's got knees. He's got greaves, they're splinted. And they're three-quarter greaves, there's more to the outside. He's got sabatons and clear evidence for coated plates over the neck.
Isn't this degree? Yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to find it in the upper corner if people have been following me.
When did he die versus when was this effigy done?
And there's always a question when you look at effigies. Most of them were done fairly close to death. But especially when you get into the later 14th century and you go into monumental brasses, there's a certain style in England that is very cookie cutter, and you bought them off a rack. Didn't necessarily represent who you were.
Are there any other views of this? Like, do we know if that's a center point or if it's more of
This is like brass, it's not a three-dimensional
it's not
object.
seven brass, it's
All right, 1330, same kind of deal. Big honking rondelles, come to nice spiky points. Elbow cop rondelle. This guy though only has a vambrace only here, not here. My experience of fighting says I get hit here, or then I get hit here. It hurts more when I get hit here. But maybe it's under there.
Yeah.
That may be,
Maybe we fight wrong.
that may be artistic also.
Yeah. But it appears over and over again.
All right, think about it, Doug. All right, if you have it on the outside of the hand, now the artist has put him in a prayer mode, and it would look like it would.
It could be. Yeah, it could have just rolled out.
Because it's here, and you rotate with the arm. Maybe.
And I would also freely admit that what I do with a sword is not what my ancestors did.
Yeah, our perspective is skewed.
So, I mean, just because I get deep bone bruises here, and I hate it, doesn't mean they didn't. Yeah.
Do you think those are like embossed purpley knees?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, look at all the floral decoration. Yeah, I think that's embossed. Totally. I think it's got applied brass. The whole of the rest of everything has these scalloped and braille borders. My vision for that is, aside from the knees, it's steel with brass borders. But it could be leather with brass borders. It could be brass with steel borders. It could be anything. We don't know. But it wouldn't be a major leap of faith to say that that's leather and brass and steel all together.
What about aluminum and titanium?
I'm pretty sure aluminum and titanium borders. In fact, that's what I was going to say.
That's good, Calvin.
1331. Once again, 1331, we could be back almost 100 years. You know, think about 1270, 50 years. You know, he's got these, he's got nothing else. Is he going for a retro look? Was the artistic representation trying to make him look like a cousin, an uncle, his father's brass? Wanted to make them match, and it's a generation earlier style? Or is this evidence that in 1331 people were dressing the same way they dressed in 1275?
It could have been a sign of status, too. Not as wealthy as some of the others.
Although this buckle with the two ears is the height of fashion in 1331. It is a 1331 quintessential buckle.
So maybe
Maybe just his belt is fashion.
they just wanted him to look like they did back in the day.
It could be. And I think that's not a bad idea. Or it could also be, he's a little backwards.
little slow.
Grandpa, it's good enough.
Could have been like those SDA fighters that prefer to have more freedom of movement.
But from an artist standpoint, it could be that he did that for detail because it would have blended right into his code. Somewhat like the shield, we could have saw it not that much detail artistic.
Anything is possible. We're talking about artists.
Yeah, or made sufficiently before his death.
That's true. I mean, he could have had this made in 1300 and he didn't die until 1330. This is all right. It's another possibility. This one's a French one, although there's an English so far. But you can see in France, 1331, the last effigy's not that far out of whack with. Rondelles clearly laced to the nail. You can see the little lace point. It's got a little skull cap, so yeah, and breeze, nothing else. So just because there is this trend of advanced armor, doesn't mean everybody was advanced.
Interesting. This, I know they talk about knights that would wear double shirts of mail. He's got it looks like tight mail sleeves coming out through wider mail.
If you look at this very carefully, though, this is represented as lines. May not necessarily represent mail. It could be some form of gambos. Could be mail. It's hard to tell, but it is represented as lines in a different way, different artistic representation. Right, Naples, Italy, 1335. This one's one of my favorite effigies. We don't know what's going on with his body. We can see his limb defenses. We got these greaves with probably applied something or other. We've got rebraces. Could be tooled leather. This guy, by the way, a little clearer example with the big wide mail sleeves and padded lace. Once again, not very different from this French counterpart 4 years earlier. This easily, in my mind, is tooled leather or leather with applied bits. But once again, that's just
There are quite a few Crusader Cypriot knights towards the early 1300s that had that type of armor on their, that type of armor over their mail as well.
Yeah, and in fact, Naples, if you went and you found 25 effigies in Naples, they all look like that. They're not the details, they changed them. It's not cookie cutter like you find later. But that harness is very typical at that time in Naples. It happens to be the only one I have good art of, but it's very much the fact in Naples.
So armor from Crusader Kingdom of Cyprus probably was influenced by Italian armorers.
It would seem logical. That part of Italy is just very much that style.
Those rear braces are very, hands are very consistent with the one for Lady and French.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it does-
Same date, roughly.
Look at how pointy his mail sabatons are, like they're over a mail shirt or a leather shirt.
Yeah.
Is that like a male standard that he's wearing around his neck?
Yeah. A cookie integral shirt. It could also be a separate applied piece. You'll start to see when you look at things. I think I included the Spanish ones. They're doing even rigid neck protection. Really.
Girls big.
The Hastings brass. The next several images all come from the same effigy, the brass of Hugh Hastings. And you get to see some bizarre English stuff. I'm not sure if the artist didn't know what armor looked like, or if armor was just kind of weird. But you've got sabatons, you've got greaves, bizarre, pointy, laced on knee cuffs, you've got presumably splinted legs of some variety, leather covered over something. You've got steel arms, once again, a little nipple on the end, than unusual. This guy, though, has his band braces with the case, and his rear braces are not. And this nice has really unusual. And he's not alone in that brass. With the same
Projectionable
thing. If you look, this is the central figure. Actually, let me go back. This is also from the same brass. Same weird pointy knees, same everything except the Princess got great help instead of carrying that beauty fascinating.
In the previous slide, the visor that projects out, where the visor dropped, would that,
It would provide programs, but we just don't
would
see.
it come down to the chest, or would it be projecting out from there?
I think it would come down to the chest. It's hard to tell. And we don't see it anywhere else. It is the Hastings brass that shows us that. And then in the central figure, Hugh Hastings himself, these are all the little ancillary figures that we were seeing. In the Hastings brass, what is this? Is this an artist's rendition of a bassinet in upflip, visor in an upflip position? In which case, is this the boxed out ocular end? I don't know. If it's side pivoted, why is it pivoting here instead of back here?
Young
It's just
Frankenstein.
weird, which makes me curious about what the artist knew about art.
Not much.
Two main ones.
Yeah, and then they're holding his pillow. His another pillow.
He wasn't a bishop or a cardinal, wasn't he?
No.
Okay. Have you ever seen in Hewitt the Battle of the Two Milwaukes?
Two office.
One of them is
The two office.
Yeah, whatever he said. And one of them is thrusting the spear into the neck of the other one, and he's got mail up over his head, but he's got a visor on.
You said a visor with no mail. That's a Hewitt. You're right. Now that I know.
No, he's got it's a mail headpiece and a visor.
Right.
Those are,
Right, but you're seeing, all you see revealed is the visor.
yeah,
With nail over this.
and it's that's
Yeah, and it's sort of a strangely shaped, it's almost kind of a sugar-looking visor. Another one of my favorite effigies, this St. Peter's one in Sandwich, 1350-ish. They don't know who it is, they don't know exactly what it is, but boy, do you see cool stuff here. Clear depth, this is a three-dimensional image. This is an applied part over the bassinet, or skull. It's got lovely little scales hanging down off of it, big round spalder here with an applied rosette. Stave defenses on the arms. It's hard to know what his hands were doing because they're pretty well sanded away. But layer after layer after layer. And possibly in coated plates with scale and then nail and then more scale. Or is this adding? Is this just the fringe from the bottom edge of the circle? It's hard to tell because it's been greatly degraded. But it's a really cool thing. And obviously some sort of rigid defense. If you follow the theory that if you have guard chains, you've got to have something rigid to attach them to, passing through the lines, bounds. It's a really cool look. I don't know how to interpret it. 1360, we start to see more traditional 14th century armor. And this guy's pretty comprehensive. He's the first really comprehensive guy. He's got sabatons, he's got greaves, he's got legs, knees, and some sort of a studded, splinted kind of deal. Coated plates, arms that are fully cased, spalders, and a bassinet of a traditional form. This, with a little bit of variation, is what you see for the rest of the century. This guy's 1360. Very typical late 14th century. And then, even more so, the staples in brass. You get to see a whole bunch of really interesting studs representing probably plates inside. And then this one is splits on the outside, presumably. And then fully developed sabatons all the way around. The others were just kind of laying on top. Hourglass gauntlets, arms that are made with integral spalding possibly. Kind of very fully developed armor.
Yeah, you get to see the inside of the wrist as well.
Right, and it's closed wrist. 1368, same kind of idea, fully developed. Also, this splinted legs. I like this. Little flanges with bells. Jingle, jingle, jingle. But weird. Bell-shaped and bell-like has the same cutout as the bells do. Leaves. So were bells important to him? Was he a bell fanatic? Or was that a fashion? It's hard to know. But the rest of his armor is pretty traditional and typical. Yeah, a little bit bells on you, so don't worry about it. Yeah.
Is there any possibility that might have been heraldic?
Except, I don't think his hair would have anything to do with bells. But it could be some sort of kenning. It sounded like something, it could be a badge that we don't know about. But he does seem to have this bell fixation.
Did he beat a church with bells on?
Yeah, it would be. Then we go into a German effigy. Interesting stuff here. And German effigies continue to be weird forever. So when England is just straight and narrow and everybody looks the same, very much starting to become cookie cutters, the Germans continue to experiment for another 50 years. I don't get this. What is this? Some sort of a cuisse that includes the lower legs and splinted, possibly kind of tapestries. But this is a nice boat plate. Solid breastplate attached with the rivets to the fall. He's got guard chains for his sword, for his dagger, for his great helm. Once again, bizarre quilted leather, splinted something on the arm, but the gauntlets are hourglass.
What's the date on this one?
1369. Ralph D. Nevington. Another really good one because we get to see an example in effigy of something that survives. Once again, we're seeing the same kind of legs we're seeing on these other guys. But here's a really nice example of a covered breastplate, very much of the style of the one in the Erasmus Museum, but even down to the arcs of rivets, just like you find on the covered breastplate. The shape of it is different. This guy is huge, but and the surviving one is very rounded for a bit more normal person. But it's very much of a style that we see. You can see it's got all the integral plates going over the shoulders, just like the one in the Erasmus Museum has. Also, the ones that survived from Estonia that nobody knows about. They have all of those, including these elaborate brigandine backs and suggestions of even integral shoulders. I'm thinking this is probably also covered in velvet. You can see the rivets or leather, whatever's covering it, because you've got all the same things going on in all the places. So we would have a very colorful look.
Do you think that's like Bruce plate groups?
In terms of his greaves, they could be made up of separate plates joined together with leather. You see that in a number of German examples. And in the German examples, there's even sometimes a finger width or 2 finger width space, and you can see the strap running that joins them all together. I think I have an example of that coming up. No, in fact, I do. It's the next example. Another German one, and unfortunately I've lost the date. This is, there we go, 1372. Another interesting one seems to have an incorporation up here. I don't believe that his surcoat actually is part of his vambrace. I think that's separate, it's just the way it's drawn. But you can see the guard chain suggesting the Lobos breastplate under it. Really unusual legs, knees here, but you can see those splinted legs that are joined. And his basket visor, clap visor mounted, is flipped up, but it has no ocularia. Though there is one surviving example that has the pierced cross in it. There's no surviving examples that simply have 6 holes across. They all have something to look at. So you can't always trust what you're seeing, or he's got an aberration. Interesting, when you look at his great helmet, these little bars right through the middle. There is one surviving German great helmet that has applied bars like that on the outside, but that helmet was substantially altered in the 17th century, so it's tough to know when those were added. But there is at least a suggestion that they could be original. Black Prince, everybody knows this one. A nice, fully developed, all-white harness, except for it's got a surcoat covering the armor. If we can trust the pieces that survive not to be just funeral armor, the armor itself, at least the gauntlets, were made of brass, Latin, not steel gauntlets at all. And they are identical in every detail to those, with the exception the surviving gauntlets have little leopard-shaped figures cast and applied across the knuckles. Other than that, they're identical to what's represented, and the helmet is identical, it survives, as is the crest. And the circa is not the same device, but it's actually more of a gambeson in the, some pictures of the effigy and the gauntlets themselves. And they're open on the insides of the wrist, just like they appear on the left. The effigy is really nice. You can see it from every angle. You get to see what it really looked like. There has sometimes been some debate about backplates in the 14th century. There shouldn't be. There were backplates in the 14th century. And if there's any doubt of it, you look at the Black Prince in profile. And he has not only a globose breastplate, he has a globose back. And he's shaped like a ball. And he's resting very uncomfortably on that ball. Nice example of a complete 14th century harness. And from here on, in England, 1378, the Foxley is it, and they start to really become cookie cutters. Plate legs, no suggestion of lanes in the lower portions, so you probably have the embossed out upper portion being used as the upper lane, but it's very much a typical 14th century harness. In Germany, though, things are not secure. Things continue to go. Big can-shaped knees, the same splinted legs with space, you can see the straps that hold them together. Fully developed sabatons, cuisses with a separate part. This may be a stop rib. It could also simply be another roll like you find on the Met example from the Calcus. Nice hourglass gauntlets, splits laid on top of something, and then rivets in the middle, presuming there's something underneath it. These arms themselves are kind of unusual in that the wings have a curlicue. Well, if you were to uncurl this curlicue, it would simply be the rest of the metal that goes up and over. It could be that they were simply cut and peeled into a curlicue. V-shaped fall and a muscled cuirass. Is that what we're seeing? It's just bizarre.
I think it's quilting over something like that.
Yeah, it could be. Almost anything. It looks like this Roman muscle cuirass with a nice crease down the middle.
There's where that's the tie from.
Could be. I don't know. I don't know how to interpret that. But it's fascinating. Nice. So I just don't look at it. Because I don't like to think of it as a muscle cuirass.
They're too regular, they're
Yeah.
too square. I think that they're quilted defense.
I'd like to see it up close and personal. Because this is the only photograph I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I see it a lot. But-
Same one.
Yeah, the same photos from the same angle. It would be nice to see it again. Here's an English guy, 1380. He's no different than the 1370 guy we saw before. Nice pyramidal knuckles on his gauntlets. Black belt, hanging his sword. Sword hung straight. Big roweled spurs. Another guy looks the same. He's not wearing one of his gauntlets, so we can hold his wife's hand. 1380, double pole. No differences. 1380, there's a little throwback. He's got studs on his cuisses. But other than that, he's the same as everybody else. And there's a strong suggestion that in this last quarter, they just made up effigies. And when somebody died, you simply bought the one you thought was attractive. Look at the faces. They're all the same guy. They don't really change. The mustaches hang out. Maybe everybody looked like that. It was the fashion.
It'd be like
John
modern-
Peacock. What's that?
It could be like modern tombstones, the ones you can get etched or whatever with the guy fishing.
Right, absolutely. And it could also be that some come out of one school that was just really into this shape, and others are a little different. Look at the peacock energy, the only real variation here, up in the spalders, some weird little things, and his knees are a little bizarre. But he's pretty much what you see everywhere else.
Would those be like the German surcoat that have the
Scallops.
Yeah.
It could be. Erzbig, 1384, nice example, still holding his wife's hand. Great helm up there at the top. Nice little recurve on the front. Put a curve here. The shape, you can see that in a couple of the surviving ones as well. fully armored. Then my favorite, Walter von Hohenklingen, 1386. Once again, the Germans, they're just not following with everybody else. He has full greaves, but they seem to be three parts together. You can see lovely straps, Y-shaped straps, big banana sleeves, globose breastplate that actually comes with this little tiny point here at the bottom. This lance rest that's now broken off, like his nose. Cheap ass name. And what's that? Yeah, that's what I like. Well, look at his helmet. His jousting helmet. Down the bottom, big broad mouth jousting. 1386. You think of that as a 15th century helmet, but there it is. Even if they have these carved 10 years after his death, 1396, it's still a 14th century helmet. Deep embossing. 1386, cookie cutter English guy and both of his wives. There you go. That's a good shot. 1387, English guy, rondelles at the elbow instead of rings, a fashion more typically seen in the 15th century. 1387, cookie cutter guy holding his heart. Source of life. But these English ones all start to look the same. The only thing on this one, interesting little bits here. One, he's got a double row of knuckles. And this, you can see the case legs, presumably 360, but they're open here, and this doesn't close in. And he's got a nice opening. But still fairly cookie cutter-ish. 1392, probably very much like everybody else, except his sabatons. I've got one solid big plate honking over the middle. And possibly leather articulation as opposed to steel on steel articulation for the knees. And he's kind of chubby by 14th century English styles. Germans continue to go. This breastplate, easily seen as a comparable to S13 in German, segmented breastplate parts. Wouldn't be a tough extrapolation. And he's got his bicycle shorts of mail on. Scalloped edges here. No suggestion of sabatons. The Germans continue to do unusual stuff.
Are the fingers on the gauntlet
Nail.
scale?
Nail.
So stopper on the breastplate?
Yeah, big V-shaped stop right on the breastplate.
So there's no center split.
Right, just like on Sherburne one, it's a center plate with a V-shaped stop.
So that's just some kind of applied thing.
Could be a crease, could be a blind brass thing, could be. Big program that one.
Yeah, you do have to be a little careful. That is a minor representation of a sculptural piece. This is a cranky version, but you notice some of the difference. They have simplified, for clarity, they've really simplified the letter.
This is an actual photograph of one. This is an Italian one. Unfortunately, he's upside down. But he's very much like what you'd see in the English ones. His fingers are really nicely defined. And they don't look like, they look a little bit more wraparoundy. But not completely, not like the SCA goes down to pizza stuff, but they're a little bit more covered close. Another one. By the way, the effigy that we talked about a minute ago is probably more likely to be carved in 1397, even though it's got a 1382 date. Another 1380s or 97. This is an English one, starting to get some decoration on it, but still very much the look. And you have the nice big wavy vault. Once again, brass edges appearing as we start to head into the 15th century. That's a feature you're going to start to see a lot of, but it's still going to look very much the same. You've got a covered garment over the breastplate, over the cuirass, everything else is visible. The bell ring one, nice heraldic surcoat, brass decorative borders, brass decorative borders, a little bit more decoration on the helmet where the aventail joins in. Big black belt, we're at 1400. And it continues in the 14th century, in the 15th century, very much like it did in the 14th century. A 1401 effigy you'd look at and you'd say, yeah, that's a 14th century guy. But just because they've changed centuries doesn't mean they changed fashion. In Italy, things are different. Very unusual. Maybe you start looking at knees that are bizarre. There's shields on his knees.
And head that doesn't match the body.
And he's got this pinhead. 1402, another Italian one, nice revolving surcoat. He's got mail coming down over halfway over his shoulders. Probably there's other armor under there, but you can see it. Another Italian, starting to see very typical tabard. It's appearing in the Italians, but the armor is the same. Another one of the tabard type Italians were 1406. 1407 in England, we still look like we're 1380 in England. Except you've got more brass edges. And he's wearing his Lancaster collar vest. In 1417, in Italy, you've got big spalders, big honking shoulder defenses. Very much typical of the next 20 years. And you look at the styles, they're very much what you see in Cherbourg. This shape of wing is in Cherbourg. The legs are a little unusual. Got male fringes hanging down from there, not like applied ones to the bottom of the greaves. But he's very much what you would see in some of the Cherbourg armor, including the breastplate that has the lower placket attached with a buckle, just like you see on that 1415 one, S18 in Cherbourg. Another guy with a tabard in Italy, tabards as opposed to surcoats in England. 1430, we take another jump of about 20 years, all white harness. By 1320, the big difference is we've lost the surcoat. This is probably what was under that surcoat anyway. We just weren't seeing it. Fan-shaped wings, fully developed head to toe, with a great basket instead of the bag. So at 1430, we start to have that change to an all-white harness, and it continues from there. 1433, articulated cuffs. Instead of being hourglass, you can see the little rivets in the cuff. And then we come back full circle. So in 1240 to 1430, we move from a guy head to toe in mail to a guy head to toe in plate. 1430, you see a lot of cloth. Sorry, 1240, you see a lot of cloth. By 200 years later, there's no cloth visible. So that's sort of, how do you get from here to there by looking at monumental objects? They're convenient because they're roughly the same position, the same perspective. So put that together to give people an idea of, if you want to look at armor from a particular period, you've got some variation. Anybody have any questions?
I told you it was infinitely